records on computer. Oh, and Jackie's ready to kick us off.
Hey everybody. Yes, I've got some news after our last meeting. So it was really way more stressful than I was expecting, but the board voted that I would be offered the incoming interim CEO role, so for the college. So it's been way more stressful than it needed to be, on account of the fact that the trustees have been really indecisive about process and order. So staff only found out yesterday that the current CEO has resigned.
Ooh,
and they don't want to announce the new structure and what's going to be happening until well into January. So I'm like, oh, sit on my hands, don't accidentally blurt it. So it's testing all my powers of, because I've got one of those faces, so when one of the team said, well, you'll probably be taking over, I would imagine. So I was like, sort of poker facing.
Possibly comment.
Which obviously means, yeah.
Well, thank you for having such faith in me, was my response. But yeah. So
good response.
That was my news. Thank you all for your well wishes. I really appreciate it.
Well done. Well done. That is exciting. And it puts you in an interesting position these first interim weeks then, doesn't it? With that. Oh, congratulations. Very good. Anyone else? No, just plenty of congratulations for Jackie. Excellent.
Sabrina, yeah.
Oh,
I don't know how to put my hand up, but just to, I guess for me, it's just the fact that it's my CEO's last week is next week, and then I jump into her shoes. So I'm really very nervous about the fact that I've only got one more week with her before she goes. So that's really my news, just to share that I'm in this weird kind of scary place of the reality of the fact that she's actually leaving.
Well, I can see Jackie and Sabrina having nice conversations over the coming weeks.
Definitely.
Excellent.
You've got to learn all you can in the next week, Sabrina, have you?
Basically, yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Will this person be available, at the end of a phone, or?
Yes. Yeah. Luckily she will be. She has said that she will be. So that's some reassurance,
Yeah.
Right. Well, then we better wait just in case anyone else is sneaking another sort of. Oh, yes, Sam.
I've actually just this morning had a meeting with most of our trustees to talk about me doing the interim CEO role as well. So our CEO leaves in March, end of Feb, and it's just been a bit of a nightmare. There's been no communication with the team. I've had a similar thing to Jackie. So this meeting's been set up for weeks, and I've had people in the team saying, what's happening? And am I allowed to say? Am I not allowed to say? It was a really aggressive meeting by a few people. One trustee who hasn't bothered to turn up to any meetings this year, I don't think, he was just firing questions at me. So I came away thinking, oh God, I don't actually know whether I want to do this or not. So yes, I'm just trying to put it behind. I think I did it as well as I could possibly do it. I'm just going to wait to hear back and see what the decision is.
And it's interesting, you may find, I mean, who knows the outcome of that, but I'm sure you did very well doing the best you could. But even that approach in the interviewing, sometimes it's about making a big noise, and it might not indicate how the relationship would continue when decisions are made. So all that sort of power, I'm using all those silly cliches like power play and everything, but sometimes they come out in that situation, especially someone who hasn't been around much, wants that, it's important for them perhaps to feel their voice heard too.
Yes. Yeah.
Well done. Are you smart? Let me just see the smile on your face of relief. And yes.
Definitely relieved. Definitely relieved. Yeah.
Very good. Excellent. Excellent.
It's always great for us to hear of, so much progression from people on the programme. It's fantastic.
Very good. Okay. Anyone else want to share before we just say no, or lots of well done. Excellent. Well, what a fantastic way to kickstart our third Zoom call. And Janet is joining us and Alex is joining us. So it was just a little bit delayed there. So let's wait till they pop in.
Oh, fantastic. That's great.
So
Four
that
more
gives,
people joined now.
that's the full
We've got
complement.
14 now, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry, mates.
You've missed all the news. You'll have to watch the video.
Oh, yes. Good thinking, Kevin.
We just had three lots of great news from the rest of the team. So
Fabulous. Well done, whoever it is.
Excellent. Okay, well, without further ado then, and on the back of all those congratulations so far, let's get into today's call. It is a touch point after our last wonderful face-to-face. I will invite you just for a few seconds now, just to keep what you want of all that excitement and congratulations, and let other things that might get in the way just disappear. Bring your attention to your breathing. Close your minds to the noise and open your minds, your hearts, your soul, your body, to the learning that's ahead of us, to the sharing, to the warmth and support of the group that we're sitting with. And just bring to mind perhaps what you're going to take away from this call, what you're going to give to this call, and allow the space for it to integrate with all the other learnings you've already gained, all the experiences where you've put things into practice and learned even more about yourselves and those around you. And just be with us as this special group who learn together and support each other so well, with tons of evidence to support that so far. And let's build on that. So what are we up to today, Kevin?
So we will start by just having a very quick reminder of what we did in workshop 2. And we've got a couple of activities lined up for you to be involved in as well. And then time permitting, and we're planning that there should be time permitting, we're going to share with you a new little chunk of input, which we think will be kind of like the icing on the cake for you, really. We've spent quite a bit of time looking at how you can influence people, how you can motivate people, and how you can inspire them. And what we're going to share with you today will kind of add to that, really. And a lot of people, when they hear what we're going to share with you today, it's one of those kind of aha moments. So it might be for you personally. So that's where we're going to finish on our call today.
Very good. Excellent. So we were just going to start off, well, just reminding you, we had a fantastic workshop 1. We took away lots of learning, and how delightful it was to hear how you'd already started to put some of that into practice when we got together on workshop 2. So we had, and on workshop 2, another fab day. Unfortunately, there were a couple of you on the call today who weren't able to make that. We have extended an invite. I trust you all got that message. If Becca, if you wanted to join us for the workshop 2 for the spring program, you're more than welcome to do that. Other than that, you've no doubt had conversations with your buddies and caught up on what we've done. And of course, there's outputs on the online as well. What we covered that day was influencing with integrity in and around. Can people remember what else was going on? There were lovely bells ringing to punctuate our learning. For those of you who weren't there, we were coping with a fire drill. So the alarm was making wonderful noises to punctuate our learning about the map of the world.
And we were allowed to stay in by special request, but it was blooming noisy.
And we moved on. We'll have a little space to talk about each of these, but we also did the making good decisions, and we learned something about the dual processing involved in that. We had an absolutely fabulous and inspiring talk with Charlotte Hill, the visiting CEO, and we looked at the strategic side of things in terms of creating the future and a simple design tool and methodology to do a gap analysis and do that. So that's the whole of the day. And then what we thought we'd do is just touch base on each of those topics. And if you've got any questions about it, or you want to add anything in terms of your experience, we'll have a little space around the topics. On one topic, we'll break you up to have a chat, and then we'll move on to the extra bit of input.
So we're going to do them in a slightly different order, but one of the things that we got you to focus on was this idea of creating an organizational vision, a purpose or a mission statement, and that should reflect your contribution to whatever system that you want to make a difference to. And we gave you opportunities to share what your organizational purpose is, and we've also put an online module up for you to share with us and maybe do a little bit of research into what have you got in place currently in terms of a mission statement, in terms of values, for example, and just to really get you to critique what your organization has in place against some of the benchmarks that we were sharing with you on the day. And then the final piece on that session was this idea of how do we design the future of our organization? Well, one way of doing it is using this development model approach and thinking about what do we want our purpose, identity, values and beliefs, capabilities to be in 5 years' time, 10 years' time, whatever it might be. And therefore, what's the gap between where we are now, where we want to get to, and how we bridge that gap then is with a set of strategic and operational plans. So hopefully that gives you a little framework to start utilizing in your organization. And it sounds as though it's going to come in very useful for for a number of you from here on in.
So just on that, were we going to invite, was there anything anyone wanted to add? It hasn't been long since the call, so we weren't expecting everyone to have done loads on that. And you had the online to prompt you as well, so well done for keeping up with that as well. If there's any questions or some observation you think might be useful for the group to hear, just a little bit of space here if you'd like to.
Kirsten. Sorry, I was going to put my hand up, but I can't find the button.
Saying hello worked well, Kirsten.
Just as a disclaimer, I'm not on my own today because my daughter had a tonsillectomy yesterday, so she is at home. She's not going to, no, don't do that thing. So I've got my headphones in, but apologies if there's any distraction.
Okay, thank you.
What I found really useful, actually, so I started doing the online module this week, actually, just to come back to it after a couple of weeks off. And then I've last week shared with my team the pyramid, and we started talking about values, and we didn't have time to do it as much as I wanted to, so I said have a think about it for next time, so we're going to pick it up. But I did the whole, what are your values? Just think about it. How do they align with what we're doing as an organisation, and does that help or hinder your role, and where do you want it to go? Because we've got our reviews coming up in March. Appraisal, so I want them to start reflecting on that and being a bit more autonomous and taking a lead in their professional development as well. And actually one of them's already come back to me and said, I found a course I really want to go on, and they've started taking a bit more direction, which is really good, and the vibe's really positive. And I think it's really, all the things we've been doing on the course has really helped me, not just to sort of frame what I'm doing as a manager and a leader, but also to give them those tools as well. So it's sort of cascading down, which I feel really pleased with, and that sits well with my values as well, which I know that we've talked about. But also in the online module, the bit that about the values of the organisation. We're at a bit of a flux because we've got a review coming up, our 5-year review. And yeah, it's interesting because I did a trustees presentation, my first one on Monday, which went really well. Said this is what I want to do next year, all done. And then a conversation that happened in the office apparently yesterday with the CEO and a couple of members of staff seemed to be the opposite of what I just said. And I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. So I said, well, I'll pick that up and follow it up, because they went, I'm a bit confused because you said this was our direction and now we don't know.
Yes, interesting. The wonders of language, perhaps,
Yes.
and us assuming people are on the same wavelength, or we're seeing it because it sounds right to us and it sits where we are at, rather than sometimes getting the nuances. But you've got a good approach. You'll just come back to it and explore it further.
I think sometimes it depends. I said it depends if it was in one of those casual conversations.
Yeah.
And sometimes with the CEO, it's hard to know.
Yeah.
You know, if it's general office, that they had the office party the night before and things. So I said, look, I'll clarify. I said, it's certainly in our directive for the next year and a half. After that, it's, I think, up for discussion, but this is our priority. So I just sort of re-clarified what my understanding was and where we are now.
Yeah.
And then, well, I said, we'll pick it up and review. But it's been a really interesting couple of weeks.
Well done. And it sounds like you're getting a common language, something that the pyramid sharing gives you across the team, is saying, is this about behaviour? Is it about values? Where do we want to tackle this? What do we want to explore further? And that can be so useful, just to have a shared language with your team. And you're taking more ownership. Brilliant news. Excellent.
Yeah. So thank you.
Well done. Okay. Thanks for that, Kirsten. I think, will we move on? No more hands up or people jumping out their seat? No? Okay. So the next thing we the next thing we had on the list, just to remind ourselves of, and certainly, you know, in the feedback and when we were discussing on the day, the excitement or the inspiration, I think, was a word that was very well utilised when we were talking about Charlotte and her conversation with us. And I know a number of you took away key pointers and was delighted by her candour, her enthusiasm, and what was the one phrase that a number of people, and I think I did myself, it was about make it up as you go along, just going for it. There isn't always a right and a proper and a tried and tested way to do things, and sometimes you just have to go for it. So is there anything that's prompted you? Is there an action you've taken, something you've done differently as a result from hearing from Charlotte? Or is it all still just a lovely permeating through the way you work and operate? Anyone want to add anything around that? Was that Sabrina?
Sabrina, yeah.
I don't know where the button's gone either. It's disappeared. I don't know how to put my hand up. But anyway,
must be a
you can hear me, right? No, yeah. So the thing that I took away from what Charlotte had said was about the building up your network of people that are going to be there to support you as you kind of go on this CEO journey. So I've already reached out to a couple of CEO ladies that I've met along the way that I'm going to go and have lunch with, and kind of try and start building up, you know, that sort of network. And they're not all in the same industry as me as well, which is quite nice. It's kind of got a lady that's the CEO of my local cinema, and somebody else who's the CEO of another local charity. So that's one of my biggest takeaways I took from Charlotte, is to really build that network.
And actioning already, well done. Jo?
Yeah, I guess carrying on from what Sabrina said, as well as, like, I've always been quite puzzled about how to engage the trustees. And I think I took away from that when she talked about managing the trustees, you know, sort of like kind of having those conversations out, you know, with them individually and kind of getting them on board with things. So that's something that I'm really focusing on, is that communication with the trustees and really pinpointing them, not just as a group and sending those group emails, but reaching out individually as well to help get everyone like activated. So and that's working quite good actually.
Oh, there sounded a little bit of surprise in your voice there. But well
Well, no,
done.
because it's always seems to be a puzzle to me of with
How
the
to-
trustees. But next, I mean, at the moment, my focus is very much on the trustees and building the board next year. So I'm really putting a lot of energy on that.
Excellent, Joe. Well done. Brilliant.
Jackie has a hand up, I think.
Yes, that was me. I took from Charlotte that her open-minded approach to strategy, and how, because the very next day when we met with the trustees, I got a real roasting from one of them because we'd changed, like it's a 3-year strategy, and sort of a year and a half in, it's clear that one pillar in the strategy wasn't articulated properly. So I'd reframed it and kind of, and I didn't really think too much of it, and because it just made sense. But one of the trustees really went for me about it, the fact that, you know, the strategy is owned by the trustees and that we can't just change something, and that the strategy doesn't end until 2025, so we've got to stick with it and all the rest of it. And I did sort of just say, well, in my view, the strategy is a kind of, and it's a diagnostic of where you are and what you're wanting to achieve, and broadly how you're going to approach. But it's not, a strategy isn't the document, you know, it's the intended outcomes of it. So we had a big discussion about that, but then I also did the picking one off at a time approach after that. So I went round and went to all of them and confirmed, you know, checked in what their understanding was, whether they were broadly supportive of the fact that it was a living document, that there could be re-articulations of if actually when you get to implementation it doesn't make sense. And they all were fine. And even this one who was particularly tricky got on board with it as well. So that was really helpful, just also not to be cowed by it and see it as one force.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think it's great to have, you know, something like a 5-year strategy to last until 2028 or whatever. But if after a year you change your mind for good reasons, I think that's absolutely fine. You shouldn't be hidebound by something that was right and relevant at a particular point in time. If you can stick with your strategy because it is a long-term view, fantastic. But, you know, situations change, the outside environment changes, and you need to respond to that. So I think, you know,
yeah, that was exactly it. You know, the relatively small thing, and it was just the fact that a phrase that had been adopted, it simply didn't work with the stakeholders it was supposed to work with. So it was reframing that and how we were doing it and how we were engaging with people. But yeah, and it also just made me think about the fact that just because these people are on the board, it doesn't mean they're bringing with them the experience and skill sets that you might want or assume in the moment. So to be a bit more mindful of that and to take things slower and talk things through
Yeah,
as
and just
required.
tying back to Joe's point as well, if you are going to make a change or you want to make a change to the strategy, you might need to do a little bit smoothing and talking to people beforehand.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Very good.
Just one thing I wanted to add in terms of the guest speaker that we had. I don't know what it is, but I don't know how many guest speakers we've had, Rita, but every single one of them has been absolutely top notch and inspiring. There has never been one dud that we've had. So I don't know whether Akiva, who actually put names forward, are just very good at finding these people, or whether all CEOs of voluntary organizations are inspiring. You know, are they inspiring before they get the role, or do they just become marvelous and inspiring when they become a CEO? Who knows? But that's the evidence that we have.
And equally, just to add to that, Kevin, they're all very different. It's
Yeah.
not like they come out of an inspiring pot. It's not
Yes.
one thing.
Yeah.
They've all
Yeah.
got totally unique ways. Some are quite introvert, some are quite extra. There's so many different characteristics. The one thing that does seem to run through them is that genuine passion and the inspiration they can give and support they want to give to other people in the sector too, I'd say. And Alex, you want to share something?
Hello. Yeah, good afternoon. I found Charlotte's her sharing really valuable and interesting, and I think one of the things that really struck a chord with me was her making sure that she's always on some other external trustee boards, and I think I sit on two boards, and as someone who's aspiring to be a CEO, it's really helpful to see and get that perspective from a trustee's and a board member's viewpoint to help you understand what you're presenting back to a board. So I think it was great to hear her recommend that, and the fact that she always goes into a job and says, I expect to always be able to have this time to sit on another board. I think really refreshing, and that's something I'm going to take away and make sure whenever I'm looking at new opportunities that I kind of carve out and protect those opportunities to learn. I think that's one of the most valuable learning experience I've ever had, is sitting on a trustee board myself to understand how a charity operates. So I'd recommend that as well to others.
Excellent. Very good. Excellent. And wise advice from within to all. Okay. And just moving forward then. And we
Yeah. So the next session, or another session that we looked at on the day, was how to improve your process of decision making. And we looked at the idea that there are two parts at play when we make decisions. There's the bit that we're not aware of, the unconscious, which we were referred to on the day as System 1, and the bit that we are aware of that we think is us, which is the conscious, the more rational thinking, in quotes, side of things, which we talked about as System 2. And we have a little activity, but before we do that, has anybody got any questions or observations on that one?
Mel?
Mel?
I was just going to say how much I enjoyed last week deliberately doing a bit of System 2 thinking, because we're often firefighting, very reactive in much of what we do, quite quick decisions. And I had a bit of thinking that I knew I needed to do, so I just took an afternoon out off email and just really did some research, thinking around it, analysing things from different angles, looking at different perspectives, looking at possible issues and solutions to the problem. And I realised afterwards, once I'd got it all down on paper in front of me, just how much I really enjoyed doing that and how little time we get in our day-to-day jobs, how little time there is to do that kind of work, but yet how enjoyable I found it. Yeah.
And in terms of the outcomes of all that enjoyable work, can you see the benefits as well? I mean, it's great.
Yeah.
It's a benefit enough to enjoy it. I hazard a guess it's going to really move things forward in a way that if you hadn't given it time.
Yeah, it was about So we run a quality mark, and we're looking at trying to essentially get a sponsor at the end of the day for it. But in order to do that, we really need to raise the profile in the first instance so that actually a sponsor's got something to want in, from engaging. So basically the thinking was all around that. And yeah, it meant that I was able to go into a meeting really feeling confident about my thought processes and about my plans, essentially, of how I could move this forward, because I'd actually had the time to think about it.
Excellent. Excellent. More power, equal power, a degree of balance and power to system 2. System 1's great too as well. Okay, anyone else? We were going to do a breakout session just to allow you a bit of time on the decision making, just between yourselves in terms of, well, what does it mean? Because it's quite a new idea perhaps for many of you. So just to have a few, what, about 8-10 minutes in groups of 3, just to say, well, what about that then? Is that it? Or did you want to share anything, Kevin? It was really saying about putting it into practice.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, from what we shared with you last time, how do you think you will take that on board to improve your decision making and that of your organisation going forward, really?
Okay, well, I'm going to open up the rooms. It'll be 8-10 minutes. Come back, and if there's anything you want to share or ask questions of the group or ourselves before we move on to a new topic altogether. So if that's all right, I'm clicking the button and you'll get your invitations to join a room. There we go. Excellent. And I'll pause the recording when I work out how to do that. That one there. Susan, you're all right? You've been invited somewhere, have you?
Yeah, room 5 with Inga. Yeah.
Okay. How many people did we catch with their mouths open halfway through a conversation? Just a few, just a few. I think we're all back. Does that look like a full complement? It does.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we have a perfect 4x4 square.
Excellent. I trust you found it useful. We know how valuable it is for you to have time to chat. We also know that we didn't give you huge amounts of time. Was there anything that you thought would be useful to share within the group now, or are you all taking away your own nuggets and having the opportunity just to consolidate your thinking around your decision making? No one jumping up and down. No one's.
Say,
Say thank you to Alex and Freya for giving me a whistle-stop tour of the conscious and unconscious decision making. So thank you.
Very good.
I was going to say, I think I don't think before I speak very often. I have a very, very narrow, thin filter. So I'm trying to take more time, especially in meetings when I'm being asked questions, just to pause and to sometimes say, I want to give that some proper thought. Let me come back to you on it. So that also people feel that I'm really considering their sort of question and point of view, rather than just quick habitual response based on my preconceptions or my knowledge prior. So I want to do that, and that's in my paid work, but also in my other voluntary role as a governor. That's been quite helpful, and I've had to do that rather a lot lately. But yeah, being aware of it definitely helps.
Excellent.
And I think that's a great phrase, Kirsten, as well. I want to give it some proper thought. So
And the magic of pausing. Becca?
So we were just saying about how useful it is when we take time out to have a think about things, because our jobs are so reactive a lot of the time. And it made me realise, I mean, I know that I don't do anywhere near enough of reflection and how helpful it is, but probably for me, it's once a month when I do my board reports. And that really helps me to take a moment to actually think what it is I'm trying to get across, and to think about the challenge that might come up in the boardroom and how I'm going to be able to articulate exactly what it is I'm trying to put forwards. And then we were talking as well about how perhaps having more of a flexible working week. So for example, I was saying about you know, a compressed working pattern. So I have that time that I know no matter what, no one is going to expect me to be there. So I can have that afternoon or whatever it might be every week just carved out, because I think it is really helpful, especially when there's so much change going on all the time. You are a lot of the time just running and trying to catch everything all at once and spinning lots of plates, and then not really having much time to actually give it for what it is that you're really trying to achieve. So yeah,
the magic of scheduling in the time so it
Yeah.
actually happens. And if for any reason it has to move, you don't delete it, you move it on. It's so precious time for you. Excellent. And Mel had a good example earlier, didn't she, of how it's enjoyable too to have that space for most of us. Excellent. Okay, scanning. All right.
Rita, just on that, if I can just share,
Yes,
a
Ellie.
working practice that we have is once a month we have a meeting-free Friday, and it's brilliant. And it just, if everyone sort of signs up to it, it creates this amazing time when you know you've got thinking space or just admin time. And it's worked really, really well for us. We had a team meeting earlier just to check in and see if it's something we want to continue, and it was unanimous. Everyone really values that time.
Lovely.
Just to get on with your day job or to stop and reflect. So I'd recommend it if you can make that work for your organisation.
Excellent tip. Thank you. Okay, well, we're shifting gear just a little bit, building on the other topic we had on day 2, where we looked at our maps of the world. And when we started to understand what we have going on, and perhaps what our reality, what it's made up of, is information that's come in that we then have deletions. We delete information, we distort information, and we generalize. So to whatever degree it happens, what we are sure of, that what we're referring to as reality, our personal map of the world and what's going on, is unique to us. And other people's are unique to them. And none of them are right or wrong. It happens as a result of the way we process information and make sense of the world we live in. So we have these filters happening, deletions, distortions, and generalizations. I think there were a lot of lovely aha moments on the day. And of course, we had a bit of brain taxing with ladies spinning around or not spinning around, or and a few of those, just to help point out just how different or how unique our thinking processes are. I don't know if there's anything in particular you want to share. We want to build on that, discussing another filter that's very, very apt for leaders to understand and for everyone to understand. But if there's anything particular about the map of the world, certainly from your online, it seemed like, that's useful to know. I've started thinking about myself a little differently and noticing what's possibly going on for others and inquiring. You need a blue and gold dress for a meeting. That would be perfect, wouldn't it? To do it that way. If it would I wonder if their sense went up or down on that occasion.
No, I used it last week, and the spinning ballerina girl, just as because we have lots of consultants who have they continually only take certain things they're interested in from meetings. So it's exactly what we talked about on the day. So I said to the team, that have a look at these, and we looked at a few. And then they came back, one of them a couple of days later, went, you showed us that blue and gold dress. It really made me think about this person. And they only focus on these things. So I need to make sure I clarify with them and talk to them after a meeting. It was really good. Just a simple thing like that, just chucked into the Friday briefing. It was really good.
It probably shocked everyone. Where are we going with this?
Yeah, I do that. I do like to keep them on their toes.
That works too in breaking long held patterns. To just break a pattern can also ignite interest, can't it? And learning. Okay, ready for more learning then? More input. Excellent. Okay, what are you going to tell us about, Kevin?
So will we get the group to do that little activity first after we've demoed it?
Absolutely. And on this occasion, which of course I haven't prepped for, on this occasion, it's just in pairs and that still works, does it?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Okay, and we want to, I'll set that up and recreate. And in pairs, it will be 7. And
Yeah, we're gonna demo it.
Demonstrate first, we are. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Okay, so sorry, I'm just having 1 or 2 technicals, but there we go. All right. So what we are going to get you to do in pairs, can you remember back on workshop 1, you did an activity, a coaching activity, where you helped somebody elicit their personal values in terms of work or career or whatever you called it. You remember doing that activity? Yeah, okay. So what we would like you to do with a partner is we want you to pick one of those values. It might be your number 1 or your number 3, doesn't really matter. And then we'd like you to do this kind of follow-on activity, which we'll demonstrate now. So, Rita.
Yes, Kevin.
So thinking about those things that are important to you about work or career, whatever it is you want to call it.
Yeah.
Can you pick one of those things that's important to you about your career and just tell us what it is, please?
Okay. Helping people live more meaningful lives.
Okay, so you folks are going to have to do this activity, yeah? So what I'm doing there is, Rita said that it's helping people live more meaningful lives.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the value. Now I'm going to ask Rita, so Rita, what's important to you about helping people live more meaningful lives?
It's about people really having the opportunities to be their best, to shine, to live their full potential.
Okay, so what's important to you about helping people have the opportunities to be at their best and to shine?
It seems unfair when people don't have that opportunity. Not, I find myself in a lucky place and I want other people to experience that too.
Okay. So what's important to you about it being unfair that some people don't have those opportunities?
It's something that I feel that I can help make a difference about. And what's important about it being unfair, if I can do anything to help there be just it's just a more sensible balance. This is a tricky one, isn't it? It's important to me that people aren't left behind. It's important to me that people can do what they do. It's important to me that I use my ability, my skills to help others.
Okay, okay, great, thank you. Obviously, we hadn't rehearsed that one.
Obviously, otherwise it'd have been much simpler.
Now, I'm just checking the clock. We've still got time to do this, Rick, for 10 minutes. We can go on without, can't we, if need be?
I think we'll go on without, maybe use those examples.
Okay, all right, we'll use those
Yeah,
examples.
sorry, I
Now,
should have had one word answers.
No, that's absolutely fine. So, just to explain what was happening there, I asked Rita for one of her values. You can do this offline, by the way, with your partner. We know you're all buddying up and working in groups of threes really well, so you can have a go at this. This is a drilling down activity. So I asked Rita for one of her values. Let's call that A for shorthand. I then said, what's important to you about A? And then she said B. And then I said, what's important to you about B? And she said C. And then finally I said, what's important to you about C? And she said D, right? So can you see how we've drilled down from that initial value and just got her to think a little bit more deeply about that particular value. So we'll come back to why we did that exercise at the end of this next bit and explain how that fits in. Now, let me just go back to see if we can share a screen here for a second. Bear with me a minute. Yeah, here we go. Okay, so if you remember when we were talking about this idea that we all have our own unique maps, we introduced you to these three basic filters, which were deletions and distortions and generalizations. There are other filters, and the one example we gave on the day, I think, was values and beliefs. So when you go into a meeting, for example, you will notice those things that are important to you in the meeting, and therefore those will be stored away in your brain as memories. Therefore, what is important to you, your values, act as a filter, because the things that are not important to you, you probably won't even notice, let alone remember. Now, there are other filters at play, and one of which are these things called meta programs, which we're guessing that most of you will not have heard of before. But we wanted to share with you an example of this, and it's a bit jargonistic to call it a meta program, but it's a pattern. Basically, we all have these patterns that we run, and we'll take you through a little example. So, first of all, tell me what you're seeing here.
Glass half full.
Sorry?
Glass half full.
A glass half full. Thank you, Jenna. Anybody see anything different?
Glass of water.
Glass of water. What makes you think it's water, Sabrina?
My own map of the world. It could be gin, it could be vodka, who knows?
It could be, absolutely. Right, okay. So let's go with Janet's answer there. So what does this suggest metaphorically to you?
That you drank some of it, or you poured out half a glass.
Well, that could be true literally, but does this bring any kind of metaphor to mind?
You mean the glasses are full? But yeah. You're frozen, Kevin, I think. Either that or you're enjoying holding the glass.
Are you hearing us all right, Kevin?
It says my internet is a bit unstable, so
we can hear you now. It seemed like you paused. So Janet was talking about, do you mean the glass half full, glass half empty metaphor?
Yeah. Okay, indeed. Now, what's interesting, I'm guessing that we all understand that particular metaphor. you know, what are we talking about when we talk about glass half full, half empty? Well, generally people will say that you know, somebody whose glass is half full is somebody who's very positive. Maybe somebody who will see the good in people, the good in situations, yeah. And somebody who we say a glass is half empty is the opposite of that, and maybe we describe them as being quite negative or noticing things that are not working. You get the idea. Is everybody kind of on board with that metaphor?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, what's really interesting about if we make those observations about somebody, glass half full or glass half empty, it's that we're making two observations. We're making a specific one. We're either saying this person is very positive or very negative, but we're also making a general observation. And the general observation is that people's behavior sometimes comes in patterns. So, you know, somebody who is glass half empty, it's almost like every time they go into one of your meetings, they'll pick holes in whatever it is you're saying, or they'll come out with, does anybody have people in your team like this? You know, who will notice what's not working and will be quick to point it out, yeah? So the idea of what we're calling meta programs is that people's behavior falls in patterns. And I'm going to share with you a particular pattern that is incredibly useful for you as a leader, because it's all about motivation. And in the same way that when we were saying to you, if you want to motivate, influence, and inspire people, one thing to do is to get to know them and their values. What we're also suggesting here is that you get to know some of their patterns, because that combination of values and these patterns, these meta programs, are like gold dust for you in terms of understanding someone and therefore influencing and motivating them. So we want to share with you in the time available today one of these patterns, and then we'll put something online to share a few more of the patterns as well. Okay, let me see if I have something ready to share. I believe I do. Okay, see if we're in the right place. Gone past that one. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to walk you through a little example, and then we'll just explore how you can use this as a leader. So the example that I want to work through is about money, okay, which is something we can all relate to. And you might want to think about this personally or about money in terms of your organization. It will work either way. So first of all, we're going to start with person A. And in terms of money, and this could be money in the bank, or it could be income, or whatever it might be, person A is very clear on what they don't want. So if this is about income, let's say, hypothetically, person A is very clear that they do not want their income to fall below a certain level because of the consequences that will bring. Everybody happy with that idea so far? Yeah. Now, let's move forward in time and say that from this kind of lofty position here, the person is falling for whatever reason towards this particular line, which is kind of a red line for them. They don't want to go below this line. So what happens is their motivation kicks in. It's one of those kind of oh crap moments. We're heading towards this thing that I don't want. And you know, this happens in organizations, doesn't it? You know, oh no, we're getting near a point where, you know, there are going to be consequences for the organization. So what happens is, as person A starts to go towards this particular line, their motivation kicks in because it's what they don't want. And let's say, for the sake of argument, for this example, that when their motivation kicks in, they take massive action, and that massive action is successful. So they start to get away from this line, which is kind of a red panicky line for them. Yeah. Now, in terms of what happens to their motivation now, they are far enough away from this line for it not to be perceived as a problem. So they might take the foot off the gas. Yeah. Now, because of that, what can then sometimes happen is they can start to head towards this line again. And when they start to get near the line, again, it's like, oh no, I need to do something here. Motivation kicks in, they take massive action. And again, for the sake of this example, let's say that it's successful, not always the case, of course. So what you can see over a period of time is that they're kind of bobbing along above this line where they don't want to fall below. All right. I'm going to assume for now that this is making sense to people, and we'll take questions in a moment, but I just want to take you through person B now for contrast. Now, and sorry, this is what we call an away from pattern, because where the motivation is coming from is to get away from this thing that they don't want. So let's contrast that with person T now. You can probably guess where this is going. Now, person T is very different in terms of their map of the world because they know what they want. And that's very different from knowing what you don't want. Now, person T then is not at the point where they want to be. So they've kind of set themselves a goal or an outcome, a target here. And because they're below it, they are motivated to do something. So they take massive action. Let's assume that that's successful, and they get to this particular point. Now, what's interesting is when I ask the question of some groups, what happens now? Some will say, well, okay, they've got to where they want, so maybe their level of motivation eases off, which is a possibility. But quite often, somebody who is running this pattern will then recalibrate to a higher level. And because they're now not at that level, they're motivated, massive action, and they get to there. So what we can see with somebody who is running this pattern, which is called a towards pattern, it's a very different set of outcomes potentially than this. So there is a real contrast between these two different mindsets, these two different patterns, in terms of either knowing what you don't want or knowing what you do want. And when I first came across this, it really made me kind of sit and think about what my pattern might be, and what was the implication of that. And then when whoever was sharing it with me shared this next bit, it really kind of sent shockwaves through my system. So if I give you folks a simple task to do now, can you do it? Is the question. One or two nods. One, Joe's
Goes bum.
definitely doing this. One or
Madeline's
two of
moved
you probably
forward, so we'll
sat
take that as a
there.
yes.
One or two of you probably sat there thinking, well, it depends what the task is. Yeah. So here's the task. Don't think of a pink elephant. Now, what's interesting about that task is that we can't help but think about pink elephant.
Okay.
That thinks about the pink elephant, even if it might be for a split second. Yeah. Now, system 2 being very clever and can understand the concept of don't think about a pink elephant, might then think about something completely different. But by then it's of course too late. So this is to do with the way that the brain works. It's the brain cannot process a negative directly. So your system 1 cannot process a negative directly. So if I say to you, don't think about a pink elephant, immediately you think about a pink elephant. In the same way that if I say to you, do not think about pens, particularly do not focus on the blue pen, you see what happens. Your system 1, your mind is immediately drawn to whatever where the subject is in the statement. Yeah. Now, why is that important? Well, it's important because if we go back to our example here, if we are unconsciously and consciously as well focusing on the thing that we don't want, unconsciously we're being drawn towards it, which is quite a scary thought. And when this was shared with me, I kind of had the realization, gosh, what was I thinking about in terms of not wanting in my life or my career or whatever it might have been? And if I was allowing time to focus on those things, I may be being unconsciously drawn towards them, which was quite a scary thought at the time. And it's a little bit like, if you are, walking with a child and you say to a child, don't fall down, immediately what appears on the child's radar is the thought of falling down. And because of that, that might actually happen. Now, as an example, is this making sense to everyone? Well, we'll take questions in a moment, but I just want to share a final example of this. That we shared this with a group of women, must be quite a few years ago now, Rita.
Yeah.
And they were actually running a
refuge.
Sorry?
A refuge for
a refuge for women who were being abused in relationships. And when we shared this example with them, they were all kind of furiously nodding. And what they shared back with us was that the people who they were working with, the clients that they had, were in these abusive relationships. And some of them would eventually manage to get themselves away from this very damaging relationship and into the refuge. And they would obviously care for them, provide them with the support, and eventually these individuals would leave. But what was shocking was that they may reappear then a couple of years later in a different relationship that was also quite abusive. And this seemed to really, this idea of away from really seemed to resonate with them, because what they said was happening was that these individuals, their perception of a relationship was an abusive one, and it was absolutely something that they did not want, and they would do everything they could to get away from it. But the paradox is, if they were focusing and on guard for the thing that they don't want going forward, there is this paradox that you're being potentially drawn towards it. And this was kind of their explanation to us to kind of reinforce what we were saying. So we'd make a strong case, really, in terms of these patterns for you going forward to think about, you know, what pattern are you running? Are you running a lot of away from patterns in your life, in your career, and therefore entertaining this possibility of being drawn towards those things that you don't want? Or are you actually focusing on the things that you want in your life, in your career, etc.?
And
we'll talk a little bit to finish about what are the consequences for you as a leader before we close today. But are there any questions or observations on what we've said today on this?
Mel had a good question. She just popped up there. Does it mean that we should ask people to not to do what we want them to do? That sort of negative psychology. And yes, it will work sometimes. That is something that will work for the reasons we've said, because we are furnishing our mind, our map of the world, with images of whatever it is we don't want. And conversely, we can furnish ourselves with images of what we do want. I'd just add as an example and share the useful question, Kevin, that helps. Obviously, you know, Kevin and I do a lot of one-to-one coaching therapy work and things as well. And when people come to us initially, they often, what do you think they come with? They come with a problem, they come with an issue, they come with something they want to get away from or don't want to do anymore very often. And the first question one asks, you know, you listen and you say, that's fascinating, you're doing that, you know, whatever. And then by asking them, well, what do you want instead? It's so fascinating, the response you get. It can be total silence. They haven't had the space, they've worked over, they've played in their minds. What I don't want is, I don't want to be doing this anymore. I don't want to be drinking too much. I don't want to be eating too much, whatever it is. What I don't want. And you ask them, what do you want instead? It takes them some time, and some people a lot of time, and the women that Kevin was referring to actually be able to articulate, create a map in their world. What does it look like? If I want to, do I want to be drinking more water? Do I want to be, I don't want to be unhealthy. I don't want to be unhealthy. Well, what do you want to be? What do you want to be able to do? So saying what do you want instead is a very useful question to ask if you notice and think it would be more useful for people to latch on to a more towards in relation to questions you're talking about with them. Okay, Janet.
Just going back to the first workshop we had and about it's about confidence, and I remember Kevin saying, what if you could? And it's very much along that line, isn't it? And the language that we use. And I'm just thinking already, just looking through this exercise, we've got 14 managers on Thursday tomorrow. And often we look at, oh, we've got rent arrears, we've got to do this, we've got to do that, etc. But actually looking at it on the other side, what would it look like instead if we didn't focus on the arrears, but where we want to go with that is really, really key. And yeah, it's how we use that. Yeah. Really, really useful. Thank you.
Yeah,
Perfect.
yeah. And the confidence one, Janet, is a particularly interesting one, because what some people have a tendency to do. Let's say this was about presenting, as an example. some people will run a little scenario before they present. Oh, I really hope this doesn't go badly. You know, I hope I don't freeze when I'm giving the presentation, or I hope I'm not going to get lots of difficult questions. And the paradox is that you're more likely, if you're thinking about these things unconsciously, you know, to be nervous, to be anxious, or whatever it might be. So, you know, flip it over and think about it going well.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times I've used that in addition to Rita's let it go. So those two things have really helped over the last 3 months for sure.
Excellent.
Just something else that Janet, I think, said there was in terms of organisationally and finances. You know, how many of your conversations are about things like, you know, not running out of money, for example, and, you know, we don't want to lose our financial backers or whatever. So how many of those conversations are about the away from financial side of things? What would happen if you started those conversations to be on the towards side? You know, what would happen if our finances went up, for example?
Absolutely. I've got a chairs meeting tomorrow also. And straight after this meeting, one of the things I'm going to do is look at the objectives that we're going to work through tomorrow and just make sure that the language is spot on its head, because it is about what we can do as opposed to what we can't do. So
yeah. Any other questions or points? Jackie?
Thanks. I had a former boss who was very much like a negative first, negative always. And that is not my natural way. And she actually found my framing of things really, really difficult, and described me as relentlessly optimistic in a really negative way. And that really stuck with me because I was probably a lot more sensitive than I am now. But it really dampened my way of expressing that. So how do you accommodate other people's needs?
That's a really good question, and I think in a team situation, it's good to have a balance. So, you know, you wouldn't want a whole team of people who are totally optimistic about everything all the time. You would want somebody in the team who is saying, yeah, but what if this happens, or, you know, we need to be careful about this. You know, for example, your finance person, it may be pretty good, actually. It would certainly be useful if they were running a pattern sometimes that says, you know, hang on a minute, we need to be a little bit cautious because of A, B, and C. And the thing to remember as well is that these things are patterns, and therefore these patterns can become quite ingrained. But in the same way that we talked about with cat and dog is a pattern, yeah, but we want you to have that flexibility. So for you, it would be very useful a lot of the time to be thinking about what is it that you want as an individual, as a team, as an organization, but then you might put a different hat on, for those of you who know the De Bono stuff, that says, okay, over the next hour, we're going to look for the flaws in this project. So, you know, you don't need to stick to one style of thinking. You can have a blend, not just within the team, but within yourself as well.
Wouldn't that flaw I'm sorry, I should have put my hand up, but wouldn't those flaws move towards what you want, as opposed to you're looking at them with a view to still moving towards what you want, as opposed to what you're moving away from, aren't you?
Yeah, I think your start point is, what do we want here?
Yeah, and Can I just, we're not saying towards and away from is equivalent to optimism and pessimism. They're two sort of separate things. So
Yeah,
the
yeah.
towards thinking tends to be more positive. It's saying what you want, but it's not like everything in the garden's going to be roses
No.
conversation. It's
Yeah.
about we want to be present in this field. We want to be really making a difference and doing such and such and such and such. So it's a little bit different to having the rose tinted spectacles on all the time and not
Yeah.
having the realism. So it's a slight nuance on that. That is a pattern. This is another pattern. And you can see sometimes in behavior there's an overlap. But I think like Janet was saying, it's like, well, what do we want here? You know, that's neither an it's optimistic in that it's something we want, but it's not rose tinted, everything is going to be wonderful, we don't have to work for it. It's that
good,
sort of difference.
Good point. Yeah. Okay, just a final thought on this one then is this is about motivation. Okay, now you will have people in your team who are running both patterns. In the long term, we would suggest it is useful for everybody to have a lot more towards pattern in their life. Yeah, but in your team, you're going to have that mixed. Yeah. Now, if you have somebody who is running this towards pattern and you want to motivate and influence them, clearly what you would want to do is to give them something to work towards. You know, you give them a target, you give them an outcome, you give them a goal, and your language is about helping them bring something in that wasn't there before. Now, if you have somebody in your team who is very adept at running and away from pattern, the carrot approach, which works for the towards person, is not necessarily going to work. So in the short term, if you've got somebody who is running this away from pattern, what will work very well is to make them aware of the consequences of what will happen if they do not do whatever it is you want them to do. Now that might seem a little bit, you know, why are we going down that road? But that's the pattern that will work for them. So, you know, if you are sat down with somebody in your team and setting some outcomes in a one-to-one for the next year, you want to be bringing their attention to these are the things that will happen if we do not achieve these particular things. So again, this is a call for beginning to recognize in those individuals who you are leading, what particular patterns are they running?
Okay. Now we are going to share what we've done on the online. We will have a recording of the this video, and we will add some extra slides, explanation around the meta programs. I trust you got enough of a taste of it to appreciate the towards or the away from thinking. We did the exercise regarding my values because it's in the language I used that you would get an indicator of whether I'm running a towards or away from pattern. There was a little bit of both, I think, in what I recall and what was happening there. Predominantly towards, but a bit of away.
Mostly towards.
When I was talking about unfairness or something, you know, I don't want it to be unfair. That would be an away from. So hope that's given you a bit to play with. We are running out of time now. We've run out of time and we've already said goodbye to someone. So reminder that we will be, just remind me the dates, Kevin, that you've got on the slide. Don't bother changing them. Just remind us on our next, we are putting up modules in the next couple of days, encouraging you to finish your online, encouraging you to keep in contact with your buddies, reinforced by Charlotte's message to us about how important the networks are. We're available if there's anything you're stuck on, want to have a chat through, as well as your buddy group, utilize us as well. Is there anything else? Have a lovely break, everyone. That's a really good. We're all saying that. We're all saying fabulous, fabulous cohort. It's been delightful to be part of this. Is there anything else that anyone needs to say apart from us putting our volume up and saying bye-bye, good luck everyone, and happy Christmas?
And
Anything
we're getting
else?
together on the 28th of February, which
28th,
incidentally will not be the last day in February next year,
the 28th
for a
February.
catch-up.
For a catch-up call, and at that point we'll simply be asking you, so what's different for you? What have you done differently as a result of all this lovely learning with all these lovely people? Okay then.
Is there a deadline for the online bit then as well?
That will start. There's is there a deadline? You will not get your ILM membership upgraded until you've completed all the online satisfactorily. So that will be, you will have another for another month to do it, and we'll confirm that in the next module when you'll have to do it. We will leave the material up there for you. We will, I know someone had a query about how they get back into their questions. We'll answer that for you, and the availability of the slide pack as a standalone. So over the next few weeks, we'll sort out those two things for you. And then the system will be available for a longer period of time. We may not be accessing it as swiftly to see what you're saying in it, that's all. And Janet, you had something?
You know, because I wasn't at the last session, there's one exercise where it's reflecting on that. Do I just leave? I wasn't there, so I can't give a reflection on how it's impacted on me. Will I still be able to pass without that, or?
Janet and Becca's in the same situation. Was there anyone else in the same situation? I'll drop a line, pick it up with you. You will have the offer to join us on workshop 2. We'll determine how much understanding you have as to whether we can sign you off and put you up to the membership in the meantime.
Thank you.
Okay. Unmute everybody and say thank you and cheerio for now. Happy Christmas.
Happy Christmas.
Happy Christmas,
Merry
everybody.
Christmas.
Well.
Goodbye.
Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Been
Bye.
a pleasure to work with.
See you soon.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.